Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at an exceptional build. It's going to be actually Dexterity Faith, which is kind of a rare combination, but it's going to be for Leda's sword as well as an offhand Fire Knight's Greatsword. So these two weapons together are really fun. There's an excellent roll catch that you get with a offhand attack followed up by a heavy attack with Leda's sword. And then Leda's sword also has really a interesting Ash of War. It works kind of similarly to Law of Regression, where it removes the buffs of the people that are hit by it. So that can be extremely nice if your opponent has gone for several buffs and you just want to remove them all in one fell swoop. You can go for the Ash of War with Leda's sword. And then it's also kind of interesting too because the sword does get a hitbox on its way down. We'll see how that can potentially help you land the Ash of War itself. Now, we also have access to the Fire Knight Greatsword, which is going to be a great weapon. The Waves of Darkness Ash of War is going to be my choice, but I also tried out some other ones throughout the showcase, so feel free to keep an eye out for those. I think there are many different options, but Waves of Darkness is just kind of a standard. So we are going to be running 58 Vigor, 40 Endurance because this is pretty chunky. Then we'll hit 101 Poise with this armor, and we'll also have the Okina Mask to boost our Dexterity a little bit because without the Okina Mask and Millicent's Prosthesis, we're actually only at 49 Dexterity, and that's just due to the fact that we also need the investment in Faith for Leda's sword as well as the Fire Knight Greatsword, which is going to be Keen infused, by the way, so just kind of keep that in mind. And then Rottenwing Sword Insignia as well as Millicent's Prosthesis are going to be great options for your talisman since you'll be getting a lot of successive attacks. If you want to sacrifice some poise, then you can go for the Godskin Swaddling Cloth, where you'll get some HP back with successive attacks as well. And then if you're going to be going for your Ash of War a lot, Shard of Alexander is never a bad option, and you could also go for the Claw Talisman if you're going to be going for a lot of jumping attacks with the Light Greatsword. But in my opinion, this was my preferred setup. Sometimes I'd swap around, but this was kind of the default that I went for, especially with the extra 5 points in the dexterity that you get with Millicent's Prosthesis. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. And I am trying to hit 10K subscribers, so it would be a massive help to me if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing. I really would appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions, duels, and then we'll also be actually looking at the frame data at the end of this video. So if you like the numbers about frames or just poise damage, all that's going to be covered in detail at the end. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the showcase. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we'll be at the Gatefront site of Grace, and we'll use our iframes to throw out a swing. We don't get it to connect, and we pretty much need to just back off due to the incoming spells. Now, this was a period of time when I was running Golden Vow on my Colossal Sword, so we will be using that to buff a little bit later on. I wasn't totally sure what Ash of War I wanted originally, and Waves of Darkness was where I ultimately landed, but you will see me using the Golden Vow as well as Flame Skewer, I believe, and maybe a few others. So yeah, just kind of keep an eye out for that. And here we get a Frostpot and then instantly cancel it with the offhand Colossal Sword. And then we go for just a couple quick swings with the Light Greatsword, and we can see just how quickly you're able to shut someone down if you're left alone with them for too long. So here we go ahead and buff up with Golden Vow as well as Flame Grant Me Strength. We top off our FP, and then we try to engage with the Host and the Phantom. So we're going to go ahead and use our Needle Piercer Ash of War and just see if we can get it to land. Doesn't work out so well, but we are able to actually interrupt our opponent before they get the Hyper Armor while we go for our heavy attack. But we need to back off a bit because they are inflicting both bleed and frost, and they really like just the R1 attack on the Gugs with bleed, so we do need to look out for that. We can get a lot of our HP taken care of, and yeah, we just miss with the offhand Light Greatsword or Fire Knight Greatsword, but we do manage to get our Light Greatsword to connect, and then we just kind of reroute ourselves because the Host has gone for a spell that sends a lot of meteors in our direction. We're not really interested in dealing with that, so wrapping around feels like the play. And then they're doing a bit of rolling. They really backed off quite a bit, and we're going to begin the chase down here. We're going to skip ahead because they were backpedaling for quite some time, and while this is a pretty good weapon for catching players, I think something like the backhand blades might have been a better swap, or something like the Pata is also great. But instead we're going to go for attack with the Fire Knight Greatsword and then Ravioli Step into the finish, which is definitely a nice roll catch. I'm not sure how often people use that as a roll catch, but now we're going to have an invasion where we get to showcase some of the incantations that we have access to. Since this is a faith build, there are some incantations that we can use. There's going to be Bestial Vitality as well as the Flame Serpent, but I really like the buff that we've seen recently on the Roar. So unfortunately we don't get to connect there, but we are trying to get these players to fall off the ledge. We get it to connect well this time, but unfortunately the direction was not quite right. Here we go for Needle Piercer and actually get the hitbox of the sword to connect, followed up by the rest of the Ash of War. And then we were hoping to knock that player off the ledge with the Light Greatsword, which does have quite a lot of pushback, but the player just rolls off themselves. And here this time we can go for a nicely free-aimed Roar where we're going to face the direction we want our opponent to go, and we can see that that is quite successful as they do fall off the ledge as well. So it does take a minute for the host Vanquish to actually show up on the screen. Not sure what happened there, but just wanted to make sure everyone knew that that host did not survive that fall. Now this next one is going to be kind of a tricky one, and one where we can see how Waves of Darkness was actually really helpful in terms of the Ash of War. So especially in invasions, I feel like it's pretty much necessary on this build. However, if you're running this in duels, I think you can just do so many different things, and actually Waves of Darkness is not going to be necessary at all, just because it's really a way to shut down super aggressive players, and it's very reactable if your opponent has some semblance of patience, which you would find in a duel, but you might not find in a multi-opponent situation. So here what we're doing is we're just seeing if we can bait these players down towards the chariots a little bit. Chariots have not been triggered, so we do need to pull them in a little bit further if that's going to work. And here we go for Waves of Darkness because everyone is swinging, and we get that to hit one of the Kevins all 3 times and then follow it up with a light attack on the two-handed moveset of the Fire Knight's Greatsword. And I would say that really picking the tool for the job is important in multi-opponent situations where you don't really want to be relying too much on the light greatsword where you don't have any hyper armor if you have multiple opponents just swinging kind of wildly at you. Using something with hyper armor is almost essential if you're going to be able to kind of shut these players down. Otherwise you need to focus more on isolation, which may or may not be possible depending on what your opponents are doing. And if your opponents have hyper armor themselves, then being able to trade into that with a Colossal Sword is going to be quite beneficial. So anytime that I want to go for an offhand Fire Knight Greatsword attack, my opponent with a Colossal weapon, if it's fast enough, will be able to shut down my Light Greatsword. Sometimes we'll be able to interrupt that with just the quick swings of the Light Greatsword, but it's not guaranteed, and especially with multiple opponents, you just never know when you're going to be in hit stun. So yeah, kind of a long spiel there on my approach when it comes to two-handing the Fire Knight Greatsword. I think once you get it down to a one-on-one or a situation where you have an isolated opponent, then it's time to use the kind of power stance setup that you've got. And we're going to back off a little bit using Bloodhound Step as a soft swap for our Misericord, and then just kind of see if we can get that Chariot to be triggered. We can see that the pressure is kind of mounting, and staying in this area with nothing to help us is just not the play. So we are going to try to continue to bait them into one of these little coves, see if they will follow us, you know, kind of down the hill, and we shoot a bow, see if we can get that to work as a bait, just seeing, you know, if they're gonna try to assume that we're not quick with our swaps. But fortunately we are quick enough with our swaps, and here as they go for their Ash of War in the corner, we do as well, and just the hyper armor meets the hyper armor, and fortunately our damage is greater. So the Chariot does come as well and traps us in this kind of small area, and that's going to work to our advantage. So it's very rare that I find the Chariot to be actually helpful in a multi-opponent situation. I feel like normally it just like desyncs and hits you as you spawn in, but in this case I found it to be quite useful. We got kind of 2 kills with the pressure of it, and then here we get a third as we swap to the bow, which does knock our opponent over, and they're not going to be in time to get to safety. So yeah, just a nice play with the great bow there in my opinion, and a good use of that kind of Chariot as well as the small space and Waves of Darkness. Next up, we're going to see a group of 3, and this one was a lot of pressure pretty early on. It's actually kind of similar to the previous invasion where we can see that just a lot of hyper armor based weapons are at play, and then we also are seeing the needle piercer from our opponents as well, so that's kind of interesting. And now we're going to be patient for a second as we've pulled out our roar, so I'm sure you can kind of assume what we're trying to do here. Unfortunately, we didn't free aim it properly. We should have faced the ledge a little bit more, but we were trying to get our camera in the right position so that we could see when the players were coming, so that was kind of the decision in that moment. But we do end up getting a Fire Knight Greatsword swing in that stuns everyone, and as our opponent is going for their backhand blade swings, it just moves them in a way that maybe had a little bit too much forward momentum. So generally that's not an issue. Forward momentum is one of the reasons the backhand blades are so strong, but in this case it was kind of the reason that they fell off the ledge. So we love that. We will note too that some of the masks that boost dexterity also lower your focus, so that's going to be a bit of an issue if you're encountering either madness or sleep. And here it would have been prudent to switch my mask. In some invasions I did, but in this one I did not. This is also one of the masks that boosts your dexterity quite a bit. I believe it's the Curse Blade mask, but it does lower the amount of HP you get back from your flask. So that's why I recommended the Okina mask in the intro, but you know, it's kind of a decision you can make. If you're going to be swapping your helm as well as your talismans every time you get a flask, then it totally makes sense to use the Curse Blade one. But if you're, you know, worried about focus and you're not going to be swapping your helm every time, then it's a little bit more of a calculated choice whether or not you want Okina versus one of these other ones. And here we are going for a gravity kill. So first we see if we can do it with Waves of Darkness. It doesn't quite work out. Next we're going to be trying the roar, so we get that nice and queued up. We do get it to land, but they're not quite at the right angle for the hit to land, but fortunately the knockback with the light greatsword is going to be enough to finish that opponent. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with gravity in this build, so I hope you can kind of see that. And this next one's also going to be kind of a fun one. So I think we've gotten at least one with the roar, one with the light greatsword, and we'd like to kind of complete the set here and see if we can get one with the Fire Knight Greatsword. So this was, I'm not sure if they were ganking or just kind of set up there waiting for invaders, but they definitely seemed to have a plan, and it involved mostly Weed Cutter as well as Moonveil. But here we can see the power of Waves of Darkness, and the follow-up swing is going to be enough to knock that player off the ledge. Now it's one-on-one with the player with the Moonveil, and we're in a pretty good spot here. We can go for our Ash of War here. I'm not sure if they had any buffs applied, but if they did, they're now gone, and we can focus on the Moonveiler. And we almost knock them down with the knockback of the Light Greatsword. We go for Ravioli Step, don't get it to connect with the heavy attack, and then we get them to quite low health before they can get their final Moonveil swing out. We finish them off with a Light Greatsword. So exceptionally bold play by that player, and we'll move on to the next one. And this one was a huge challenge. These players were enjoying the albinuric pots, which is not something you see a lot in invasions, and when you do see them, it's tough because not being able to heal is problematic. Your ways around that are to use a blessing, or you could also use something like a raw meat dumpling, but not everybody has access to a lot of them. Not everybody, you know, reverts their save, so they get those replenished before they go on an invading spree, but it's good to keep those in your back pocket for moments like this. However, we will not be using either of those throughout this invasion. So here we can see that debuff is applied where we're not able to heal due to the albinuric pot, and we're going to see if we can get a Waves of Darkness off that will do anything meaningful while we still have half of our health, which is a very bold decision for sure, but it does allow us to finish off one of these phantoms. So that was awesome. I was very happy to see that, and now we just need to see if we can escape the incoming projectile spam without being able to heal for a little while. But fortunately we do heal, and here is just a big shout out to Bloodhound Step. I haven't been using it that much, I would say, since the DLC dropped, but I would say it really is probably one of the best soft swaps. Also note there that I did do an animation cancel by hitting my sword against the wall, so if you don't want the fall animation, that's a great way to cancel it, is to just swing your sword close to a wall. If you hit the wall, that animation will take priority over the fall animation. So good note there. There are other ways to cancel your fall animation, such as the Great bow, you queue up an arrow. That's a good way to go. Similar to the cat ring swap, you could go for a great bow swap. And obviously, if you're invading, you might need that great bow a lot. So just having that on lock could be a great way to just get a couple of extra frames of ability to run and not get hit by potentially plunging attacks coming behind you. So a little bit of a tangent into the realm of animation canceling drops, but we can go back to this invasion here as we are hit again by an Albinauric pot. Unable to heal, we go ahead and swing our Colossal Sword, get hit with a crossbow. So those crossbow bolts are very hard to react to. They come out quite fast, and though the status has been nerfed a bit, they still can do a lot of damage, especially if you get hit by the lightning or the fire bolts. Those hit pretty hard, especially when you can't heal. So we're gonna back off a bit and try to look out for Honed Bolt, just do our best to avoid taking too much damage until we can heal again. And once we're topped back off, we're gonna try to bait them a little bit with the Great Bow. Not a great shot on my part. We also see some healing or just faith-based buffs coming into play, and that's going to be a great time to use the Needle Piercer. So if everybody's buffed up with Golden Vow or something, we can go ahead and turn that off with Needle Piercer. However, we are going to throw out a few swings with our Colossal Sword first, and here we're actually able to hit our opponent. I'm not 100% sure if I see the change. It looks like they still have the bit of an aura around them, but the idea is there, and I would say it's not the most consistent depending on their roll timing and their iframes, so just kind of keep that in mind. We do go for Waves of Darkness here. They go for Endure, but they don't have enough HP to tank the incoming swing, and here we get super excited. It's now a one-on-one. We're going to chase down the host, and we're going to get there as fast as possible by jumping straight to our death. So this was unfortunate, but yeah, it happens. Our first opponent is going to be running Mirai's Executioner as well as the Godskin Swaddling Cloth. So their game plan is to both get in damage during their Ash of War as well as recover some HP. We're going to be trying to shut that down with a heavy attack from Light Greatsword, but they do mash into us and they are doing a good job of getting HP back with their Ash of War. Now we're going to back off, and we do swing backwards to be a little bit non-committal and avoid getting our hands hit by the hitbox of the weapon. And now we're going to just try to play a little bit more passively since we're a little bit low on HP. But here we do get a whiff punish with our offhand weapon, get the roll catch with the heavy attack, and then actually get a perfect read on their jumping attack and shut it down with Needle Piercer. Next, our opponent will be running a buffed up Great Katana, so we'll need to respect the quick pokes that come out as well as the jumping heavies that are a little bit hard to get reads on and can be delayed quite a bit. So we're going to trade a little bit with our heavy attack and actually shut down their sword dance with our offhand Colossal, and then back up a little bit, switch over to the two-hand moveset to get in some quick pokes if possible, and potentially use our Hyper Armor. Now we do go for Ash of War, Waves of Darkness, and we do get one of those hits to connect, but we need to back off a little bit, and we begin to pressure with our offhand Colossal. Now we do go for our Needle Piercer Ash of War. It doesn't connect, but we did manage to avoid the Sword of Night Ash of War, so we're pretty happy about that. Now we are going to swap our talismans real quick and then see if we can get set up with a light attack on our offhand weapon. Come in for the heavy attack, attempted roll catch. We don't quite get it, but we do swap over to the roar and get the finish. So that's a great way to finish your opponent, and I think a lot of times they don't expect it. Our next opponent is going to be starting off hot and heavy with some lightning attacks, but we're going to fortunately dodge that, and then they're going to use their Ash of War to kind of get out of dodge and then go for a heavy attack, which is definitely a good kind of surprise. Now they do pull out a shield with golden parry on it, and we don't really want to get parried, so we're going to swap over to the two-handed moveset of our Fire Knight's Greatsword, and then we go for one attack, try to follow it up with our Ash of War. However, that does not connect, and it looks like they got a perfect block in there, so that's pretty cool. However, we do back up a little bit and switch back over to two-handed moveset on our Light Greatsword and get a nice free aim jumping attack for the finish. Our next opponent is going to be running a Moonveil as well as an offhand staff, and that allows us to go for an interesting thing to attempt where we can try to get a read on one of their spells, and if so, we can trade with it with our Ash of War Needle Piercer. So keep an eye out for that. First off, we're going to be playing mostly melee, and this can be a good way to condition your opponent to kind of forget the fact that you have a long-range Ash of War. So if you can time things right, it could be very beneficial to go for your L2 button right when you think they're going to start casting. So we strafe one attack, and here we expect a cast. We set up our Needle Piercer. well timed to land a whole bunch of damage, and that trade works out well for us, and we can follow it up with a running heavy on Leda's sword. Our next opponent is going to be someone that probably recently saw Stielovsky's video showcasing the power of the backhand blade crouching attack. So they're going to be using that crouching attack quite a bit throughout the showcase of this duel, and we'll need to really not be too overcommittal against it or try to shut it down with our offhand colossal sword. So here that offhand colossal does well to just kind of shut down their aggression. We can use it again, and we're just periodically throwing out our heavy attacks with our light greatsword. Now we reset back to neutral as we do go for a talisman swap and just try to get set up with a little bit extra poise, although I believe the crouching attack does 110 poise damage on backhand blades. So, you know, I'm not even sure we have 110 poise, which is why it's so devastating in most instances. So we go ahead and throw out some swings with our offhand colossal sword, and we do need to swap back over to our talismans that are going to improve our damage as well as decrease the damage we take since we are at low health. Now we are going to play pretty passively here in neutral because just being too overly committal could be a problem, and here we throw out some swings rather boldly, just expecting them to come in kind of hot and heavy. They do a good job of rolling pretty much everything, but we're going to use Fire Serpent as well as Needle Piercer to apply some pressure in neutral as they are at very low HP. And here we try to set something up with Needle Piercer, and we catch their roll with Fire Serpent. Our next opponent is going to be running a halberd as well as an offhand axe, although I don't believe this does get the true combo, so we don't need to worry too much about that. But here, as they mash a little bit with the axe, we can shut it down with the offhand colossal sword. And latency was a little bit weird, but they kept staying in pretty close, and we were able to get a number of heavy attacks with the light greatsword, and that allowed us to get substantial damage. Now, it is very close at this point. We don't think they have much of a chance left. Here, we thought we got them, so we started opening our menu. Took one more swing, but we did get them in the end. Okay, so taking a look at the numbers here, we will see the light greatsword's poise damage for the one-handed moveset. So this is going to be the section with the full light attack chain, and really the most important number to look at here is going to be 121. So almost every attack is going to be doing 121 poise damage unless it's in the later part of the attack chain. So the R1-2 is going to be doing 75, and all the subsequent light attack chain is going to be doing about 75 poise damage. And we can also take a look of the few exceptions to this. So that's going to be the fully charged attacks are going to be doing a lot of poise damage, and then we also have some more that are going to be doing over 133 poise damage. So that's going to be any of the jumping attacks as well as the guard counter. So that's just worth considering. Even if you are going for heavy attacks with the one-handed moveset, it's only going to be 121 per swing. So each of those individual swings are both going to be 121. So worth considering there. Most people are not running over 121 poise. I think this is probably an argument for having it available as a swap if you see somebody running a light greatsword, but I don't know, your fashion gets pretty rough at 121 poise, so I think that is a breakpoint that people aren't mostly going for. Next, let's take a look at a couple different scenarios. So the two things we're going to look at is going to be if you go for a light attack with your offhand Fire Knight Greatsword and then follow it up with an uncharged heavy, and then we'll also take a look at how the heavy attack followed up by a light attack is different from a heavy attack followed up by another heavy attack, because there's a little bit of a speed difference there. So for this first scenario, we're going to assume that your opponent is going to be rolling directly out of stun, and we go ahead and we swing that Fire Knight Greatsword. We're in hyper armor starting on frame 8, which is amazing, and our incoming damage multiplier is going to be 8.25, so that means we'll be only receiving 82.5% of the incoming damage, which is not the full 100%, which is great. And then we also see that we get a hyper armor poise contribution of 90, and then we also get a incoming poise damage multiplier of less than half. So your opponent's swing will be doing less than half of its normal poise damage. So that's great. And then 18 frames in, we see the attack comes out, and we'll assume that our opponent initiates a dodge here. So this is a tier 2 stun, so damage level 2, which is why we have the damage level 2 set up. And we can see that they're not going to be able to start their dodge until frame 43. We've queued up a medium roll for them, at frame 43, and they're going to be in iframes until frame 58, and then they're going to be in recovery frames here, and then they're going to be able to dodge or move again later on. They can light attack on frame 63, but we're looking at this section between 59 and 62. So let's go back up here, look at this Fire Knight's Greatsword. When can we go for a right-handed attack? That's going to be on frame 35. So we've got that set up nicely here, frame 35. We have our heavy attack queued up. So this is the R2-1, since it's the first attack in the light attack chain. And we're going to release our heavy attack here on frame 40. The first swing is going to be during the iframes of our opponent. We see that up here at frame, looks like frame 50, but we do get our second attack to come out at frame 61, which is squarely in this section right here where they have no iframes, but they're not able to do anything. So that's going to be their recovery frames. That's the sweet spot we're looking for. And then you can also consider playing some mind games here. If you wanted to charge this a little bit longer and try to get this attack here that comes out on frame 50 in the uncharged version to come out here, you might likely get both of those attacks to connect. And then there's also just other reasons you might want to charge it up a little bit longer. If you don't think your opponent's going to roll out a stun, then you can, kind of just play some mind games with the timing of the follow-up heavy attack. But I do find it to be quite nice. And then we can also take a look at what happens if you go for a one-handed R2 and then you want to go for your next attack. So the light attack, or the right-handed attack rather, if we go for the R1-2, so the second attack in the light attack chain, that's going to come out on frame 61. But if we look at the R2-2, so the second attack in the heavy attack chain, then if we just line everything up properly, we can see that that comes out on frame 63. So really, it's only a 2-frame difference between going for a follow-up light attack versus a follow-up heavy attack. And I feel like that makes a good argument for just going for another heavy attack, which I think is pretty natural, but it can be useful to just kind of see what the frame difference is, or if you feel like you need those extra 2 frames, throwing in a random light attack after a heavy attack could be a great way to go. So just considerations there in terms of timing. And yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to say about the frame data. If you have any questions, there's obviously so much that you could really talk about when it comes to frame data, but I wanted to just throw some numbers out there and just try to make this tool a little bit more accessible for everyone who's curious, and also just give people who don't actually want to go in and set this type of stuff up a look into some of the frame data. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I really would appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.